Well, hallelujah. Here we are again. And I've appropriately entitled my message, What's Next? With a certain air of sarcasm about it. What's next? Like, what are they going to dream up next? So here we are, like we were not many months ago. There's a few thoughts I'd like to share this morning that, in my mind, are very pertinent for where we are as a nation, how we fit into the world system, and where we are as Christians, and where we are as non-Christians, but men and women who believe in what is right and what is good. So let's begin. Christianity was born during one of the harshest regimes on earth, the Roman Empire. Against all odds, Christianity gained a tremendous foothold, and in 30 short years, evangelized the known world. Dying for your faith was common. Of the 12 disciples, the 12 apostles, one disciple never made it. The 12 apostles, only John died of old age. And not in a comfortable old folks' home. He was banished to a miserable island and lived out his years there. Most of the disciples, apostles, they died by the sword. Some were clubbed to death, speared to death. Many died by the sword. They got their head chopped off. I have an interesting question. How many whacks do you think it would take to chop off somebody's head? I recently talked this fella into coming home with me. Told him he could stay for the winter and he could have meals with us and stuff like that. So I thought, how many whacks would it take with a sword to get this guy's head off? How many whacks do you think it would take with a sword to get Apostle Paul's head off? Valid question. Some of you are grossed out. It's because we've grown soft in this day and age. The guillotine as we know it was not invented till 1790. And it was invented on this cause, that a more gentle and humane of execution could be implemented. Oh yeah. You want to put that in your pipe and smoke it. So I want to read several verses out of the Bible. I'd like to draw attention to my closest followers here. I said before, I think they're a married couple, and I validate that on very good grounds. They hang out together, they fight once in a while. They seem to like each other. I think they're married. Anyway, so I'd like to read a couple verses out of the Bible. I'd like to draw attention to the Bible and not your phone. I don't discredit what's on the phone. I've got one. But you can't become personal with your phone, but you could a Bible. And we should. Don't neglect your personal Bible. So I'd like to read from one of the guys who gave up his life. This is the half-brother of Jesus. He said this, "Count it pure joy, my brothers, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith develops perseverance." I'd like to insert the word courage, personal courage. The testing of your faith develops personal courage, courageousness. Verse 12, blessed is the man who has personal courage under trial. Sorry, I'm mixed up at the best of times. Blessed is the man who perseveres under trial, because when he has stood the test, he will receive the crown of life that God has promised to those who love him. Blessed is the man who has personal courage, who is courageous. He will receive a crown at the end of his life. Here's one for you. On one spectrum, we have courage. On the other spectrum, we have this. The cowardly, the unbelieving, the vile, the murderers, the sexually immoral, those who practice magic arts, the idolaters, and all liars, their place will be in the fiery lake of burning sulfur. This is the second death. Of 8 categories of people who will not make heaven, the leading category are the cowards. This is staggering. This is almost frightening. To think that the entire human race is found somewhere between James chapter 1, verses 2, 3, and 12, and Revelation 21, verse 8, that all humanity is found there. One of the hardest human attributes to develop is courage. Courage. There was a day when men were men, women were women. And this kind of an individual sailed out on the broad seas hundreds of years ago, and they discovered our nation. If we would say to a group of men today who are married with wives and children, and we would say to them, hey, why don't you get in this big tub with these bed sheets here used for a sail? Let's go sail over the edge of the horizon, see if we'll fall off or not, and see where that takes us. I don't know any men who would be excited to say, yeah, I'm kind of up to the challenge. Why don't we do that? Not likely. We live in a day and age where the attribute of being courageous is very thin in our ranks. And I could say by the same token that there was a day when Christians were real Christians, when they were willing to stand up for what is truth and right, when Christians were real Christians and they were united in faith and in purpose. And in that way, they took over the world, and in a few short centuries became the #1 leading religion in the world. And we still hold that position, although we are being greatly challenged these days. Real Christians, and I include women in this group, not only were men, great men in the day, there are also women who were great women in the day. Women like Ruth, Esther, Naomi, Deborah, Mary, the mother of Jesus, the woman type that is described in Proverbs 31. There was a day when men were men and women were women, and they stood up for what is truth and what is right. And not only Christian men and women, good men and women who knew the difference between right and wrong, good and evil, stood up for what was right and what was true. Truthfully, in view of first century Christianity and first century life, what's going on today, the trial we face today, the fact that I'm in my shop in all my glory, the fact that we're here one more time, this kind of trial and testing, well, in light of first century trial and testing, this is at best cute. But I'll say again, as I've said in the past, what we've witnessed in the last year with the shutdowns, the lockdowns, people en masse just obeying the government with no questions, government controlling our coming and going, what's essential and what isn't, not being able to pay for something with cash, have to use a credit card. What we've witnessed in the last year gives a little insight into what the future could look like, what the end times could look like. And in my mind, I see two scenarios. I see two possibilities that are very likely to play out. One, life in Canada as we knew it and as we currently know it, that it will be no more. And secondly, a scenario which the Bible speaks of, which is the end of the end times, the very end, when it'll be very dire, and when Jesus returns as King of Kings and Lord of Lords. There's two scenarios. There could be hundreds of years in between these two scenarios. Life as we know it or knew it in Canada, how that could change, and whatever the end is going to look like. So somewhere in between, there could be 50 years, 100 years, 500 years. Don't know how much time could be between these two scenarios. Should this message be discovered in a couple hundred years, I suppose I could make the Saints Hall of Fame. Not because of my great oratory skills or my depth of insight, simply because those who know me personally and know all my faults and failures, they're long gone, they're dead. So there'd be no second opinion. The fact is, life in Canada, as we know it today, could change. It is changing. It's gradually changing. And there is no voice to counter it. A very weak voice at best. And ultimately, one day, the end will appear. It will come. It will be very dire. And Jesus will return as Lord and as King. Recently, in recent weeks, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, in a live news release, in a casual, confident, matter-of-fact tone, he validated that Canada will participate in the great global reset. At least the current government of Canada will participate in the great global reset. But that might not mean nothing to you. It might sound like some scene off of Star Wars. I don't know what Star Wars is, but I heard some people talking about it. They never said Moon Wars, so I'm going with Star Wars. What is a great global reset? What are we talking about? What is our Prime Minister hitting on that so confidently says, we've been talking about this, and in his words, the current world pandemic is an opportunity to begin this initiative. What is the great global reset. It is a UN initiative to bring in a one world government system. And we in Canada, those of you who listen to my voice, we would be affected politically, economically, religiously, racially, morally. Our freedoms, our free will, and our voice will no longer have an influence. It will be eliminated. Someone else will govern us. Someone else will tell us what is essential. We will have a new monetary system. We will not use cash. This is what's coming. We are currently faced what is now. The big question is, are there any real men out there? Are there any real women out there? Are there any real Christians out there who will stand for what is right and what is true? We may never have to lay our life down as they did in first century. Maybe we will. Are we willing to be ostracized? Are we willing to be laughed at? Are we willing to be run out of town? Or our building taken away from us so we can't have church anymore? How far are we willing to be real? What we're going through now, in light of first century, it's small. But my concern is that there are few who have courage. There are few who are courageous. There are few who would stand up on a street corner and declare what is right. There are few who would stand up in Parliament and say, this is wrong, this is right. There are few pastors who are willing to stand up and declare what is right and what is wrong. We are a people in this country who have come very commonplace with what is easy. We no longer have to get up and go to work and work hard and toil the way our forefathers once did. And or get a hoarse voice from talking loud. We have become a soft people. We have become soft Christians. May the scriptures remind us. James, who was thrown off a high wall, 100 feet, he fell down. They discovered he was still alive, and they beat him to death with clubs. He said, count it pure joy when your perseverance. Some can't handle the heat, preaching's too hot. When your perseverance is tested, count it all joy when through your testing you acquire courage and you become a courageous individual, willing to stand up in the face of all odds and all persecution, holding true what is right and true. Count it all joy. That's what James said. And he said in verse 12, you will be rewarded when you do that. And John, who outlived them all, who had the great revelation, records in Revelation 21 verse 8, lists 8 categories of people who will not make heaven, and the leading one are the cowardly. I can't explain that. I just quote that. Somewhere between James chapter 1 and Revelation chapter 21, all people of the world, all Christians, They fall into these categories. May we be challenged to be courageous. May we look at our current little struggle that we have and the inconvenience, and may that allow us to become more courageous and to, in our hearts, start to stiffen up and take a stance and speak up for what is right. May we do that. I am. Join me. Hallelujah. Let the world be filled with real Christians. Hallelujah. Yeah.